The second part of the debate that never happened was another bias introduced by Myrdal that we can call the benevolent autocrat bias, the bias to believe in benevolent autocrats. So Myrdal envisaged a government and its entourage as the active subject in planning, and the rest of the people as the relatively passive objects emerging from planning. Now, in this world, anything good that ever happens in a country, who gets the credit? The authoritarian ruler gets all the credit for anything good that ever happens in this world, in this worldview that was introduced by Myrdal. And this worldview is still very much in the mindset today. So there have been a few years of good growth in Ethiopia, which in the volatile world of low-income economies doesn't really mean all that much. There's lots of booms and busts in developing economies. You cannot take all that seriously, a few years of good growth. USAID actually admitted that a lot of the recent growth was just recovery from a drought. But that did not stop everyone from giving credit to the Ethiopian ruler at the time, Meles Zenawi, for the growth. Bill Gates said that, quote, Meles Zenawi has made real progress in helping the people of Ethiopia. USAID celebrated how Meles Zenawi had made tremendous progress transforming its economy and society. World Bank President Dr. Jim Kim celebrated Ethiopia's transformational change, which he attributed to a, quote, stable government. Stable is kind of one of those euphemistic words that means dictator. That takes a long-term perspective, and the long-term perspective being, I want to stay in power as long as possible. The other thing strange about declaring Meles to be a benevolent autocrat on the basis of a few years of growth and a boom and bust economy is we're also directly omitting any evidence of his malevolence, of him not being so benevolent, which included shooting demonstrators down in the streets after rigged elections in 2005. He was caught by Human Rights Watch manipulating famine relief to go only to ruling party supporters in 2010. He introduced another forced resettlement scheme in Ethiopia called villagization. So like the Uganda example, farmers their lands were taken away from them by soldiers. They were marched away to government model villages. They were anything but model. They lacked basic services like water. The farmers' land rights and human rights were violently disregarded. And anyone who protested this, he put in jail. Specifically, he jailed a peaceful blogger named Iskender Nega in 2012, sentenced him to 18 years in jail. In fact, to bring the story totally up to date, Meles has since died of natural causes and has been succeeded by another dictator named Haile Mariam. Secretary of State John Kerry just arrived in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And to show how seriously the Ethiopian government took any concern for human rights that might be emanating from the US government, the Ethiopian government celebrated his arrival by jailing 6 bloggers and 3 journalists and sending them to join Iskender Nega in prison. That's how little they cared about any US human rights concerns, which were basically non-existent to begin with. So Hayek, again, was very prescient on all of this. He said he warned the experts in the road to serfdom, don't trust the benevolent autocrats to do good things. He objected to anyone who does not object to coercion or arbitrary power. This is Hayek's protest. He is criticizing those who do not object to coercion or arbitrary power so long as it is used for what this expert regards as the right purposes. And so the main hope must be that the wise and the good will rule, in Hayek's words. And so, which Hayek quickly refuted in another chapter in The Road to Serfdom called Why the Worst Get on Top, about why autocrats are not benevolent. Because in an autocratic system, there will be special opportunities for the ruthless and the unscrupulous. In such a system, the readiness to do bad things becomes a path to promotion and power. So this bias to believe in benevolent autocrats, which leads us to give credit for any good things that ever happen anywhere to any autocrat that happens on the scene, is the second bias that biases the development community against freedom as a path to development and in favor of an authoritarian, technocratic approach driven by a tyranny of experts who supply technical solutions to benevolent autocrats to implement them. The third bias is probably the hardest one to get over. And I put together another Hayek slide. This is the one that is probably going to be impossible to ever convince the development community to give up this bias. It's the bias in favor of conscious direction instead of spontaneous solutions. Of course, the idea of conscious direction creates a big demand for experts. And Hayek, in fact, noted that he had been promised himself as an economist that he would have had a much more important role in any sort of consciously directed society as an economist, but he declined that role. I want to follow that tradition that I used to be one of those experts that benefited from the belief in conscious direction, but I've repented, I've recovered. I'm no longer an expert, I'm a recovering expert. But of course, that doesn't apply to the large community of development experts who they believe that they are in charge of consciously directing development and making development happen through conscious direction.